Well, here we are. This is a series that we started doing, this approach to doing a series a while back, starting a long time ago, where we said let's devote our spring event to talking about sexual integrity every other year. So here we are. You got to fall in that year, sixth graders. Welcome. And we used to have a tradition where we'd have you come up and yell something with that word in it, and so we're not doing that anymore. Where we say, sex is a beautiful thing, but it ain't everything. Yeah, so we're going to talk about that. And before our good man Corey Carlisle speaks, so Corey, let me get them warmed up just a minute. You stay right here. And so you who are here, a part of our March series in Youth Night, y'all remember, what was the name of that series we did in March? In Youth Night, oh man, what was it called? The March Youth Night series, Live something. Live No Lies. There you go, Live No Lies. That was a whole month and more ago. So Live No Lies. And we were talking about how there is so much contributing to our confusion and wreaking havoc on our lives. And I would go as far as say nothing is being attacked as much as this topic we're going to talk about this weekend. And so I think it's extremely important and valuable for us to talk about something that there is a lot of confusion on, even within Christianity. So that's why we're going to talk about this, and I think it's going to be immensely helpful. To start, I need to acknowledge that words do change over time. Y'all know this. Obviously, words change. So I am now, I don't know if I'm officially like an old man, but I am older than you, that if I start using a word that is kind of like a trendy word, it's when I start using it that it's dead to you. And so, for example, if I say the word, that is gas, or the phrase, that is gas, what does that mean? It's good. It is good. You know what it sounds like? You know what it means to me? That is the fuel that goes in a car or a lawnmower that makes it run. That's what I think. Or, this is bussin'. Y'all know what that means? I know. Isn't it just like so chuggy hearing an old man say that? Yes, I just slipped another one in there. You're welcome. That was a 2-for-1. If I say that's bussin', what does that mean? Awesome. What else? Did I get it right? Delicious? Oh, well, okay. Delicious. To me, it means that person is cleaning off the table so that the next person can come and sit down at that table at the restaurant. Busting the table. Let's see if there's another one. Oh, how about, I think this is a little bit older than you guys, but I think y'all still know this one. You certainly don't use it. And that is tarnation. That was a good one. No, that's not what I was going to say, but that's a good one. Let's bring that one back. Sick nasty. Y'all, is anybody say sick nasty anymore? No? Okay, sick nasty. What would sick nasty mean if a young person were to use it?
Probably disgusting.
No. It's cool. It's good. Man, that is sick nasty. That, where's Big Al? Where's Big Al? That flippity-doo-dah that he did on the skateboard was sick nasty. Flippity-doo-dah, I'm sure, is what the skater dudes say. And so sick nasty for me would mean somebody threw up and they're sick now and we got to clean it up. And so, man, it's just words change. I know it's frustrating. It's like so hard to communicate with us because we older people just don't get you, and you kind of are okay with that. You want to have your own lingo. I help out at a high school once a month at this club that they regularly use words that I think it's like they all know because they make looks at each other, like, oh, we're saying one that the adults don't know what we're saying, but I'm like, I'm for sure you're trying to say something really inappropriate right now, but I don't know what it means, so I have to just go along with it. All right, so we're going to start with getting on the same page on this word that's on the screen, sexuality, not 101. I don't think that's changed. Sexuality. So you guys, actually, I'm going to use these, but we do need some writing utensils, and keep those papers in here, Bobby, for tomorrow. We may need some of those. Or if you like to journal, Bobby's got some little note. Okay, so what I need you to do is take one. Start passing. There you go. Take one. Get a piece of paper. I need to say this. you guys know that when we start talking about things like sex and sexuality and start saying words, it's just going to make you kind of squirm a little bit sometimes, or snicker, or giggle, or feel awkward or uncomfortable for a minute. I get it, and so here's what I'm going to say about that. It's okay. That's normal. I get it. That's not. I mean, it's to be expected. I will say, just acknowledge that was a little weird or uncomfortable, and then move on. Let's move on to let's keep listening and hearing what the person is talking about, and you might learn a thing or two. So let's hear what sexuality is. Well, I guess we got it. Well, we're ready to go on to 201, Corey. You got those notes ready? I mean, that's encouraging. Well, I say it's encouraging. I mean, you got something that came to your mind when you thought sexuality. That's all I asked. I didn't ask for, there's not a quiz to get it right or wrong. As a matter of fact, when you see Sexuality 101, you may think of school, like it's class, and to some degree, this will be there is something to learn. I don't want to act like that's not the case. There's something to learn because you need to know the truth. You need to know what's real about this, and so we want you to learn the truth, and because you learn the truth, you live accordingly. You live like what the truth is. So now, Corey, if you'll come on up. This is Dr. Corey Carlisle. Thank you very much. And so, yeah. Corey, what do you want them to call you this weekend? The good doctor, Doc, Corey?
Doc is fine. No,
Corey. Corey, okay. So when you see him around this weekend or any time ever after, you call him Corey. And he is the husband of Inisha and really proud father of Arya and Caden. Man, those are two precious children. And so this weekend, you may feel like, I kind of got this. It's 101. I got this. Okay, then let it be an encouragement, a reminder, and let it be bring confidence to you that there are other people who buy into this. You're not alone out there in your public school or your online thing where everybody is just telling you this is the way it is. You are not alone in believing that there's something way more important, way more profound going on about our sexuality than what the world says it is. You're going to learn something new, possibly, that you never knew before, and I really do think it's going to challenge you to change the way you think. See what I did there? Change the way you think. Renew your mind. Sometimes you got to think, man, I do have to shift the way I think about this. And so that is what I'm encouraging you to have your mind open to. And let's be respectful of one another. I am all for doodling and taking notes and drawing. I really am all for that. That's good. We have note paper back there that if you need to do that or write in a journal, that's all good. I just ask that you don't distract from others, especially if you're like, I just feel uncomfortable. That's okay. I already said that's okay. Acknowledge that and let's move on. And Corey is I'm going to pray a blessing over Corey and over you as we start talking about this because it's ready to dive in. Our Father in heaven, your name is holy. You are set apart high above all the others. And yet you have desired for your kingdom to come on earth, to bring your kingdom into this earth through Jesus Christ. And we want to see him in his glory. We want to recognize him. We want to acknowledge your beautiful design in this world, the way you created us, and learn the truth and deconstruct or peel away the lies. And so thank you for Corey, who's willing to speak the truth in love and filled with grace. And it's in Jesus' name that we pray. Amen.
Amen. Thank you. Thank you for having me. Thank you for Rocky and Ben for the invitation. It's exciting to be here. And echoing some what Rocky said, there's a mix of excitement and discomfort and embarrassment. And some of that is as it should be. In talking about sexuality, we're entering into a sacred topic. So there should be some discomfort that comes with this topic because it shouldn't be as casual as talking about sports or weather or the like. And so some of that discomfort is simply highlighting the weight and significance of the topic that we're talking about. While there's discomfort, some discomfort that gets stirred, as Christ followers, I believe that every area of our life should be open to receiving the wisdom of God and learning how to live our lives accordingly. So while it may be uncomfortable to have some of these conversations, embarrassing to have some of these conversations, it is good for us to dive in. While it's sacred and there's weight and significance here, I hope that you have a good time this weekend. We can still laugh and have a good time along the way. Given the nature of this topic, some funny things might get stirred in your body over the weekend. Know that also is natural and normal. You're not doing anything weird. You're not doing anything bad. Your body's just healthy, and that's just part of God has designed it. So don't get distracted by that. Rocky had a good setup in asking what sexuality is. That's going to be our topic for this evening. It's just diving into what do we mean by sexuality and understanding God's design for it. But in order to understand that, we have to start at the beginning. We have to start at our origin story. And so origin stories take us back to the beginning to remind us of our identity and purpose. My wife and I, we enjoy a good movie. We don't necessarily keep up with all the latest movies, but we enjoy a good movie. So several years ago when Black Panther came out, we watched it several times in the theater. We loved it. We got involved into it and got sucked into that Marvel universe. And so when the last ones came out, I'm forgetting the names, but the Endgame and Infinity War, we wanted to watch that as well. And so we're in the theater watching, and we enjoyed it, but we often found ourselves times in the movies like, what is going on? Who is this guy, and what is Infinity Stones? And there's times where people were laughing, and we didn't really understand what was going on because we missed the beginning. We missed some of the origin story. And so as we went back, once we got home and watched some of the earlier movies, things started to make sense. All right, so here's Thanos, and here's the Infinity Stones, and here's where all this came about. Things made more sense once we're able to go back and get the origin story. And the same is going to be true with our sexuality. Often we engage in this dance of the sexes. All right, we know there's this attraction bit and romance and marriage and babies and all of that stuff. We've never taken time to go back to the beginning. Why did God create sexuality? And so my first question for you this evening is just that. Why did God create sexuality? If your story is similar to mine, this is not a question that was asked growing up. We may talked about some of the do's and don'ts about our sexuality, but we never talked about why God created it to begin with. But kind of like watching the movie, you get more out of the movie when you know the beginning of the story. Same is going to be true with our sexuality. When we know the beginning of the story, we're able to appreciate it and we're not lost along the way. And so why did God create sexuality? You've already answered some of this question, and some of our answers reveal some of those holes in our thinking. Some of you are spot on, but often when we think about sexuality, we think about attractions. We think about the act of sex. And certainly that is part of sexuality, but our sexuality is not reduced simply to attractions and body parts and what we do physically. Our sexuality is more about who we are and who we are as males and females. And some of you got to that when you were talking about gender. I think about this in terms of boxes. And so this big box of sexuality is where we spend most of our time, what I call just the dance of the sexes. And so we take our gender with us everywhere we go. And so I'm a male, and I'm going to interact with you as a male with a male or a male with a female respectively. When I meet a stranger at the store or a visitor on Sunday morning, again, I'm bringing my gender into that interaction. And so we don't, everywhere I go, I'm going to take my maleness with me. You're going to take your maleness or female witness with you respectively. And this is where we get relationships like father and mother. They're both my parent, but I'm going to interact with my mom different than I interact with my dad based on those gender differences. I'm going to interact with my brother different than I'll interact with a sister based on those gender differences. My daughter's going to be interacted with differently than my son, again, based on those gender differences. They share a similar love and dignity and respect, but there's also going to be distinction in how I show up in those relationships. And so, again, sexuality 101. Understanding the big box. When I talk about sexuality this weekend, I'm not talking about the behaviors of sex per se. I'm talking about this larger box of who we are as gendered beings, this dance of the sexes. The erotic behaviors of true sex, that is part of sexuality as well. But as you can see in the box, they occupy a relatively small real estate in a larger frame. And so those erotic behaviors, holding hands and kissing and making out and all that stuff, that is part of sexuality, but again, a smaller box. And even true sex, the act of sex itself, is even then a smaller box reserved for marriage itself. But even in marriage, while you have access to all those boxes, the sex act itself still takes a relatively small amount of time compared to the rest of it. And so whether you're married or single, you spend most of your time in this larger box of sexuality, of this dance, of the sexes. And so again, for me, sexuality, the heart of sexuality speaks to who we are as males and females. And this shapes all of our social relationships as we take our gender with us wherever we go. Unpacking this a bit more, our sexuality is also three-dimensional. Often when we think about sexuality, we think about just the physical components of sex, and certainly it includes that. In school, sex ed, we talked about sexual anatomy. We talked about how babies are made. They scared us with some STDs, and it was focused on the physical part of sex. And so certainly that is true. We have developing bodies, we have hormones, we have curves, we have rippling muscles, we have all those fascinating things as it relates to our sexuality. But there's also more to us than just our physical bodies. We also have a soul or a psyche. And so this is our inner world and thoughts and feelings. And so this is our personality, our temperament, our personal stories. All that shapes who we are as sexual beings. And so our thoughts and fantasies, while we feel a certain way around certain people or when we're exposed to certain images, all that is part of our inner world, all part of our psyche. And then our spirit, this is that deepest part of us that's able to commune with God and practice true love with each other. And so again, to think about sexuality just in limited terms, to just think about it as the act, or just think about the physical component of it, we miss a lot of the depth, we miss a lot of the richness of who God has created us as sexual beings. And so again, as I talk about sexuality this weekend, think about the boxes. Think about these three dimensions. And now back to the question, why did God create sexuality? And so you spent some time thinking about what sexuality is, but why did God create sexuality? As Christ followers, we go back to the beginning in Genesis. Then God said, let us make man in our image. So God created man in his own image. In the image of God, he created him, male and female. He created them. Why did God create males and females? God created males and females because he wanted beings in his own image. He wanted people to model after him, and so he created us as males and females to reflect his divine nature. And so sexuality is about who we are as males and females. And God created males and females to reveal who he is it then fair to say that our sexuality is God reflective? That creation reveals the Creator. That we can start with God and learn something about our sexuality, or we can start with our sexuality and learn something about God. And so if God is a creative God, then something about our sexuality should also be creative. If God is an intimate God, then something about our sexuality should also be intimate. If God is a playful God, passionate God, then something about our sexuality should also be passionate and playful. Whatever those attributes of God are, because we reflect his image, that should be displayed in our dance of the sexes, at least to varying degrees. We can also start with our sexuality and learn something about God. And so we can read passages about God saving his people with his powerful right arm. Because we know masculinity, we know what masculinity looks like, we have a clear picture of who God is. I will satisfy you like a baby at his mother's breast. Because we know femininity, we know what that image looks like, we have a better picture of who God is. And so again, our sexuality is God reflective. We can start at either point and learn about the other. This evening we'll start on the first part of the equation, taking some of the attributes of God and learning about our sexuality. And tomorrow, we then start with our sexuality and what does it mean to be male and female, and what does that point us back to God. And so God is love, which is expressed through ultimate truth, goodness, and beauty. And so God is truth. God reveals himself to us and invites us to do the same, sharing the truth of who we are with each other. Another way to say this is intimacy. And so we're sharing who we are in the presence of another. And so part of sexuality is this intimate part, that we're sharing the fullness of who we are, back to the three dimensions. It's shallow and a false sense of intimacy just to give our bodies to someone. Part of true intimacy is sharing our entire being with that individual. And so body, soul, and spirit. And again, at different stages in a relationship, we share different degrees in different types of relationship. There's an intimacy that's involved in friendship that's going to be different than the intimacy involved in a dating relationship or in marriage. But again, because dance to the sexes is not limited to just a sex act, part of that dance to the sexes includes our same-sex relationships as well. Some of you talked about goodness before we got started. God is a good God, and he generously provides us with all that we need. And so we also generously offer our very selves to bring more life and goodness into the world as well. Our sexuality should not be selfish. So it's not something that we simply take and get. It is something that we offer. How do we bring more goodness into the world through our very selves? And so again, whether in friendship, whether in dating, whether in marriage, part of our responsibility is to use our maleness and our femaleness to bring more life and goodness into the world. And finally, beauty. In God's presence is the fullness of joy. And our sexuality should reflect this rich celebration of life as well. In many ways, our Christian circles, we can do well the truth and the goodness aspect of it. Sometimes we struggle with this beauty aspect. But there's beauty in just watching a sunset. There's beauty in listening to good music. There's beauty in just being able to take in the joy of God's creation. And there's a part of our sexuality that's just, wow, I just want to take it in. I just want to bask in the beauty of that. Some of that is finding someone attractive. There's like, wow, thank you, God, for allowing such beauty to exist in your world. Or it may be admiring or respecting something that someone did. It's like, I don't want to do it. It's just like, wow, like you did a good job in that. And I can appreciate the beauty of that moment for what it is. And so my main point this evening is creation reveals the Creator. And this is true for our sexuality. Our sexuality tells a story and helps make visible the invisible qualities of God. I like that passage in Romans that talks about that point, that we're without excuse because creation reveals the invisible qualities of God. Most of the time, I thought about that creation in terms of mountains and sunsets and butterflies and all of that, and certainly nature reveals God. But how much more our embodied selves, creatures who bear the image of God, how much more should we reflect his image through our sexuality? So Rocky and I are going to have some time to discuss some of these concepts, but that's what I want to leave you with this evening before we switch over into that. Think about how your sexuality reveals the Creator. What about your sexuality tells you about God? What can you learn about your sexuality by reflecting on the nature of God himself? And so maybe reading through scripture, through your connection classes, or what have you, thinking about, all right, here's what I've learned about God. What does that look like to play out in my sexuality? Thank you.
Corey, that's a great start, man. We're not done with you, so we gotta dig in on some questions here. And I did not do a good job of explaining. I explained the most important parts, that you're a daddy.
Yes.
But what I didn't explain is, what do you do vocationally? The reason that we invited you to come talk has a lot to do with this topic. So maybe tell these guys, let's start by telling them what you do vocationally.
Yep. So by profession, I'm a licensed marriage and family therapist and certified Christian sex therapist. So I spend a lot of my time working with individuals and couples at the intersection of their faith and sexuality and how that applies relationally.
Yeah.
So I've been in private practice for about 13 years now,
Okay.
doing that.
Very good. So, another really important question based on what you just talked about is, you mentioned one movie that's an origin story that you really enjoy, which, man, Black Panther and Wakanda Forever, excellent. Got any other origin stories that are favorites for you? Any that you enjoy particularly?
Yeah.
They're loving making those these days. They make a lot of money, so they keep making.
Where they go back, like growing up, I still want to watch it. Wolverine was one of my favorite superheroes growing up, but going back and getting to some of his origin stories. But you can name any of the superheroes.
Yeah.
So Superman, Batman, whatever. You appreciate those characters when you know here's how they got into their roles.
Did you hear that did y'all hear? They're making a Willy Wonka origin story.
No.
Have y'all heard this?
Yeah, it's coming out in December.
With what's his name? Timothy Chalamet. I knew I could rely on Aiden over here to know that. As young Wonka. That's just fun. He's a young Wonka.
Oh, I thought you said it was called Young Wonka.
No.
I was like, oh.
That would be kind of a young Wonka. Yeah, that's not, I don't know. It's just Wonka. Okay, I don't know. I just thought y'all would enjoy that with origin stories. Okay, yeah, going back to know the roots, going back to where did this all come from? All right. So, the big boxes. Eli, could you get that on the screen again? I think that's a helpful image, and I mean, this probably is the first time most of us have seen that. Many in this room have seen that. So, I think for tonight, I would love to ask you to help us let's wrestle with dance of the sexes a little bit better, because tomorrow morning we're going to start to understand a little more of like a biblical worldview or an understanding of God's design for males and females. That is a very confusing part of our world now. Maybe it's like, well, no, it's not. Well, maybe it isn't to you, but it is to a lot of people. And so let's talk about it tomorrow. And then even tomorrow night, this idea of erotic sexual behaviors. But I do think it'd be helpful to just make sure we understand some of these terms. Actually, let's go to erotic first, then we'll come back to dance of the sexes. What do you mean by erotic sexual behaviors? You gave a few examples. But
erotic sexual behaviors are those things that are moving toward arousing physically or psychologically. And so again, holding hands, making out, kissing, all that would be part of the erotic sexual behaviors. So things that you would do in at least a dating relationship. So you don't just hold hands or kiss anyone. If you're at least in a dating relationship, those would be behaviors that would be appropriate there.
Okay, so we'll get to that. It's very much more narrow. You don't just do that with everyone. Okay, so dance of the sexes. Mm-hmm. Let's say a little more about that. Maybe just one more time, say what do you mean by that term, and then that'll help us.
So yeah, dance of the sexes is our interplay of the genders. And so we take our gender everywhere that we go. And so again, I show up as a man, interact with you as a man. If you were a female, our relationship would just be different based on that. And so we take our gender in every interaction that we go in. And so when I say the dance of the sexes, it's simply that interplay that we show up as males and females everywhere that we go. And so it adds a richness, a spark at times, where we talk about sometimes tongue-in-cheek the battle of the sexes, but I like the dance of the sexes is that, all right, why do you say things the way that you say them? That doesn't make sense to me. And so if you get a group of guys together, there's going to be a different energy with a group of guys together than a group of girls together. The energy is just going to be different. The energy of a mixed company, again, is going to be different again. And so there's something about our gender relationships that change the atmosphere of the interaction.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, that does make sense. I see it when I come in this room and I'm out there, and that doesn't make one better than the other, stronger, right, different. Cooler, whatever. Yeah, it's different. But I guess talk just a moment, if you will, about like that is speaking to an idea from the world, I guess, that is, do you hear messages from the world that is kind of confusing that idea that there is a uniqueness to males, a uniqueness to, and we'll get into those a little bit tomorrow morning, but like what confusion is the world throwing in on this dance of the sexes?
Like you're saying, some of it is almost erasing the gender, some of the distinctions, where some of the pushback is understandable, where if we make those differences, like you're alluding to, value statements that one is better than the other, okay, then we can go off into the wrong way. So how do we honor both our dignity as males and females, but still respect some of those distinctions? And so to say that males and females are different is not to say that one is better than the other. It's just different.
Yeah. Can we get practical for a minute? Dance of the sexuality. So, I mean, I want to make sure we understand this, because we're about to go out and like be thinking, okay, sexuality includes every aspect of my life. Mm-hmm. Does that mean this is included in our, I mean, this is in a sense, is sexuality.
In a sense, yeah.
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 And so that would mean you're helping, we'd have to change the way we think, that sexuality does not only refer to the act of
correct
physical sex. Yeah.
Correct. And so we're not reducing it just to the act of sex, or even, as we alluded to, some of the erotic aspects of it when we think of sexuality and thinking about it in erotic terms. There's sometimes we use the language of social sexuality, simply meaning our social interactions with each other. And so every social interaction is a type of sexual expression in the sense that we're bringing our gender into those interactions.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, what aspect of God? I guess that would help us to understand a little more. what aspect of God is he really like? Is God a gender? Is God a sex?
No.
Okay.
And so we reflect, both males and females reflect God. And so some have used the term genderful in the sense that all gender comes from God, but he himself is not considered a gender being. When we read through Scripture, he takes on the masculine pronouns, but he's not limited to masculine qualities. As Paul was talking about on Sunday, there's feminine qualities that are reflected in God as well, and we get into some of that in the morning as well.
Yeah.
So no, God is not limited to a gender. He flows into all of our genders.
Yeah. So we want y'all to think about sex and sexuality as a good thing. It's a beautiful thing. What were those three? Y'all have it written down? The three attributes or qualities?
Body, soul.
Well, that's the dimension. Okay, dimension. Good. Actually, I'll come back to this. I think what? But it's truth, goodness, and beauty. So maybe let's. Can we go with truth? Go to the first one. Truth. Okay, and you talked about this, so invites us to reveal himself. In what sense is sexuality like representing the truth? How are we needing to live out the truth of about God in sexuality? So it's certainly in this. He created us in a certain way, a certain gender, and so I guess I want to just make sure we understand how truth.
Yeah, but certainly part of it is showing up as who we are as a gender being, but it's revealing the entirety of ourselves in our interactions. And so oftentimes we hide. Like online, you can have these different avatars, and so often we interact an avatar versus revealing who we are. And so we put on our mask, we say our Sunday best, but we're not necessarily revealing who we are. And so part of the truth of this dance is that we reveal who we are, obviously in appropriate ways. And so on Sunday morning, sometimes it's very appropriate to keep it at a casual, surface, small talk level.
Yeah.
But in deeper relationships, how do I reveal the entirety of who I am? And again, this is not just about opposite sex. Some of this will be in the same sex relationships as well, that as friendship deepens, there's a level that you reveal more of yourself, even in those friendship relationships.
Yeah, that's okay. That's helping form the concept in my mind. So we're trying to figure out, especially at this phase of life, middle schoolers, incredibly important time in life to figure out what is my identity, and we try to play with a lot of different versions of ourselves. We think, what is popular? What are people going to like? What are they going to accept about me? And so we have a really hard time with this one, I think, because we're less concerned about the truth than we are with what will be popular, what will be accepted. And so I can see how that plays out, the way you just described that. And then the next one is, and I'm sure there's a lot more to that, and that's why we get small group time to say, like, and I get that truth part, because a lot of people are faking. A lot of people are like trying to just pose and posture and be something, and where a lot of the confusion comes in. Goodness. Help us understand, just like, how do you see the goodness of God displayed through our sexuality?
So when you think about goodness, if you want to think about the acts of love, and so how can I do loving acts to bring good to someone else? And then how do I use my gender in order to do that? Some, again, we'll get into tomorrow, particularly what does it look like as a man or as a woman to bring good into the world. But here what you think about is the acts of love. How can I use my being and who God has created me to be to bring good to others? So the guys who brought the table up, that was an act that used their strength to bring the table up here. That's a reflection of goodness.
Okay. It sounds like we'll hold up on some of, like, going too far into that, because we do want to talk about that tomorrow morning. But I do see how in who God designed us to be, we are able to bring goodness into this world. We say around here that our mission is to partner with God to spread his goodness throughout the world. We do that through exactly who God designed and created us to be. And so then the last one is beauty. And I like you talked about nature and the verse that we can see his qualities in nature. And again, we'll talk about some of that tomorrow morning. But anything else you want to acknowledge on that one?
Yeah, here's more the feelings aspect of it, where
Feelings, okay.
you get to just experience the joy of God through the sexual dance, to the dance of the sexes. And so it's not so much relational, where truth can be more about the relational aspect of it, the intimacy, the goodness more about doing loving acts. The beauty is simply basking in the joy of what it is without necessarily trying to do anything or experience anything other than the joy of it. To be fair, all these three interrelate. So while I tease them out to make a point, as you get into beauty, it's like it's hard not to experience some of the goodness. It's hard not to experience some of the truth. They're all going to commingle with each other, but helpful just to tease them out into the three separate concepts.
Okay. I want to wrestle with a little bit. Some of it I know we're going to address a little more tomorrow night about the brokenness that is associated with sexuality. So I want to leave a little bit for that. But I can imagine for some people in this room, they're like buying in, totally no problem. Like, I got it, I'm with you. For plenty in this room, there already is brokenness, pain, a lot of confusion and lies associated with sexuality. And so I guess, what do you want us to hear this weekend? Maybe even a little teaser, like what, if that's what's on their brain, give us a little bit of teaser where we'd go if someone is feeling like, I'm struggling to see this as a good thing, see sex and sexuality as a good thing. So
that's part of what I hope for this weekend, is to give everyone hope that God is for our sexuality as well, that God is one who created us as sexual beings. And so some of the distortions, some of the confusion, some of the brokenness that we experience is because we don't have the origin story. But in knowing the origin story, when we read the creation account, God declared it as good and very good. So our sexuality is a good thing. And so part of what I want to do this weekend is to paint that picture that, no, this is good. There's been distortions, there's been perversions, there's been brokenness, but part of the gospel of Christ is that healing is possible, peace is possible. All that things that were broken can be restored and experience God's original goodness. So what I want to do is paint that picture of what that original goodness is to give us hope that this is what I can move toward.
Yeah. Used a phrase a few minutes ago that was really instrumental in helping me understand this concept of we are sexual beings, and it affects everything that we're doing. I mean, it's part of our true identity, and someone helped me understand it like we are social sexuality. By the way, just you mentioned earlier, explain that a little bit more, social sexuality, and just help us understand like that friendship level of what that means for our being, because that's where most of us are. We're not at the phase where we're having
the big box.
Yeah,
right.
So that big box, I mean, that's where most of us live. So how does that affect? Just talk about friendships and.
Yeah, so most of us can be in that social sexuality, or what I call social sexuality, meaning simply our social interactions with each other.
Okay.
And so yes, that can include the opposite sex sort of dance, but also includes the friendship aspects of it. And again, even whether you're single or married, that friendship component is going to be important of just developing same-sex friendships. So like the passage of iron sharpening iron. And so there's something about being with the same sex that just sharpens us, refines us, enriches us in a beautiful, beautiful way. And so part of this dance needs to include those same-sex relationships as well.
Yeah. I think that's so important. It was really helpful for me to understand, why are some of my guy friendships so deep, so like where we really desire to have another man that we can be very honest with, very transparent with. And I appreciate that brotherhood, friendship I have with some men in my life that explains like what God is looking for is for people to know each other, to know and be known by one another, and we have a very hard time doing that. You don't have to answer out loud. You don't have to acknowledge this verbally or with visually, but isn't it hard to let people really in and really trust? Even not just boys. If you're like, can I let a girl really know who I am? Not just that. Girls, can I really let a guy see me for who I really am? Not just that, because we try to like pose and make ourselves up to be a certain thing, but also we do it with others of the same sex. Ladies, posturing, posing, putting on a presence for others to appear in a certain way. And gentlemen, we do the same thing. We love flexing, whether literally or physically, in all kinds of ways, ladies and gentlemen, to put ourselves in a certain way. And so the the craving that each one of us has, that I'm hoping that you are willing to be honest about, is we want to know, is anybody going to love me for just who I am? Is anybody going to accept me and be care for me for the way God really made me? And so that's what we desire for you, is to find those relationships. And I'll shoot you straight. That's what I hope to have in this youth ministry. So when we're talking about sexuality, we're not talking about the act of sex. We're talking about the way God designed us to interact with one another that does involve sexuality, sex in a one covenant relationship. But we're also talking about, are we treating each other respectfully? When we say, respect one another, are you doing that? Are you honoring them for who God made them to be, not using them as objects, not which we'll save that for some more conversation later in the weekend. But I think one of the best ways, to just echo what Corey said, one of the best ways to show that we are reflecting God, being an image of God, is to embody healthy sexuality, to recognize you can say, I am a male or I am a female, and that is a good thing.
Amen.
And tomorrow we'll talk about, well, what does that mean with my gender? What does that mean about my, I don't always do the things that people say boys do or girls do. That's confusing. And people make fun of me for not being boy enough or girl enough. And just giving you a little teaser of what we have tomorrow. And what about all the good stuff you're saying? I mean, I'm already too far down the track on some things. I just am struggling with my sexuality, the way I view myself, or the attractions I have, or the things the actions, the behaviors I am acting out because I just have something in me that I just can't control, and I don't know what to do with this. And so Corey is, I'm very grateful for his way he speaks with grace and truth, and is willing to help us start to wrestle with and understand. No wonder it's so confusing. No wonder it's so confusing, because the world is telling us, you just be whoever you want to be. You just make it up, and it's okay. It's up to you. And what Corey is drawing your mind to, what our small group leaders are drawing our mind to, is the scripture, the Bible, that says, no. You don't get to make that part up. That was already done for you. You get to decide, am I going to be faithful, obedient, faithful, to walk in the way God made me? That means figure out, okay, you made me a guy. You made me a male. What does that mean? And how do I live in healthy relationships with everybody? Not just my wife, but with all y'all, with everybody. And the world makes that really weird. Jesus showed the way, I got to stop, because I'll start preaching. I got to stop. The way he interacted with people, we just look to Jesus, and we'll get to some of that. The way Jesus interacted with people, he was not scared or intimidated about talking to anybody, no matter what they looked like, no matter what they were guilty of, their past. It's just, I want to be like that. And so let's learn how to do that. And I'm grateful y'all are willing to go on the journey, because not everybody's willing to talk about this. So let's do this.